Hey everyone, welcome to the channel and another review. Welcome especially if you're new, and welcome back if you've been here before. So I just got back from seeing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness at the theater, so let's talk about it. And in this movie, Dr. Stephen Strange casts a forbidden spell that opens the doorway to the multiverse, including alternate versions of himself, whose threat to humanity is too great for the combined forces of Strange, Wong, and Wanda Maximoff. So my anticipation going into this was, it's I thought it might be the my most of the year, even higher than Batman, kind of leading up to it. But when the day arrived, I definitely, looking back, was much more excited. Or I was more excited going into Batman versus this, but I was still very excited. I really liked the first Doctor Strange, and I think the main reason I was more excited for the Batman was just kind of the unknown of getting a new iteration of that character. So I just had no idea what to expect. And in this one, it wasn't quite the same thing. It was, we're dealing with the multiverse. So you kind of hope for some cameos, and then it'll be a good movie. But presumably, this is still, it's still Doctor Strange, and it's still going to be a sequel to the first one. So I think that's why it comes in as a second of my, most anticipated movies of the year so far. But with that, I'm going to kind of just talk about my general thoughts on the film, and then after that, I'll let you know when I go into spoilers, but I'm going to go into spoilers after that, just because I think there's a lot to talk about in this movie that would be hard to without going into specifics. So, generally speaking, I think this was a fun sequel. I don't think I think I liked the first one a bit more. It just felt a bit more fresh in my mind, but this was definitely, yeah, definitely a fun film. Feels very much, or it's the most horror of any Marvel film that we've had, and they definitely kind of push those sort of elements throughout, kind of the creepy, the jump scares and things like that. So that was, I think, fun to see. Other than that, I thought the music was fine. It kind of fit the sort of horror-esque theme, but it wasn't terribly thematic. So I'll be curious to see if on listening to it, if it comes across as very thematic. But it definitely feels like Danny Elfman, which he's the composer for it, so you can tell it's you can hear his kind of style through. But that, I mean, I think it does fit. So that was, I think it has a decent story, but there are some issues that I had with it that kind of keep it from being higher in like my Marvel list and just as a Marvel film. So I think overall though it was a fun sequel. There's a lot of like kind of cool stuff that they do in the movie, and I do think I'd probably give it a letter grade of a B. So yeah, not quite as good as the first one, and probably kind of middle of the pack for Marvel films overall. So that's all I'll say without going into spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend going to see it without getting anything spoiled. I do think you'll get more out of the film. But kind of on that note, or one of my criticisms with the film is that I think they showed too much in the trailer. So if you can avoid the trailers for it as well, I'd recommend that. But yeah, with that, we'll kind of jump into the spoiler part of this review. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, come back once you've seen the film. So, but yeah, I would say, I mean, I do recommend this film. I think it's a good Marvel film, but yeah, just a solid B at this point. I think going through the characters is going to highlight why it's maybe not higher. I think it had potential to be higher, but there's just a couple things that didn't quite hit home for me. So going through kind of the characters, I think highlights this. And the first one is Doctor Strange. I think he's the character that we've all grown to know over the course of his first film, and then being in Infinity War, Endgame, and No Way Home. But given that this is his movie, I would expect that he has some sort of character development and more of a like an internal struggle that he has to overcome, rather than just having things thrown at him that he has to overcome. So there wasn't really any personal growth that I saw in his character throughout the course of the film, and I think that just makes it a weaker story. If there's no character development, if it's just plot, like if it's just things happening and he has to overcome, he's to do. He certainly explores, I think, more of his abilities in this, or we see a lot more of his abilities that we haven't seen before. Although, since we're not, seeing them within the context of him learning them, where they're kind of described, I think that kind of hinders. We're like, oh, he's doing a lot of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily come across. It's hard to grasp exactly what he's doing. So, before I go on, yeah, just I'm in case you can't tell, I've got my Captain America shirt on. I don't have a Doctor Strange shirt, but this is the only Marvel one I had, so I wore it to the showing tonight. So it was kind of fun to wear it there. But back to our review. Next up for characters, we have Wanda, who is so the synopsis that I read. If you're at this point, it's spoilers. So the synopsis that Stephen Strange opened the multiverse, and like that was completely wrong. Like not even the least bit correct in my opinion. And well, yeah, I would say for the most part, kind of technically, the other version of Doctor Strange pushed America through the first one, with like through the portal into our world, where things started to go wrong and the plot kicked off. But it wasn't Stephen Strange casting a spell. It was America Chavez that, coming through, and that opened things up. But anyway, back to Wanda. So she's the villain of this story, and I don't know. I thought there were just some issues that I had with her. She's not probably not the weakest villain, but it felt like her being a villain, they gave her some reason or justification that she wants to, be with her boys. And, it helps having seen WandaVision to get that backstory. I think you'd be completely lost if you hadn't seen that, or it'd be just a lot to just kind of go with. But even having seen WandaVision, it took a bit of a leap of faith for me to be, like, basically my explanation that I took away from the film was the Darkhold basically corrupted her and gave her this Scarlet Witch personality. So she kind of has a split personality. There's the Wanda side of things, and then there's the Scarlet Witch side of things. And especially coming off of like Moon Knight, which just wrapped up this last week on Disney Plus, I think it would have been a lot better if they had presented those as like two unique personalities. And come the finale of the film, when Wanda decides to destroy the Darkhold in the end, like I wish there would have been maybe some sort of better representation of that internal strife. Like if we could look inside her mind like we did when Xavier went into her mind and was trying to pull Wanda out. I wish we had kind of gone back there and we would have seen Wanda kind of break free, because I never really got that. It just felt like she was sort of brainwashed by the Scarlet Witch personality and came across as a very kind of mustache twirling villain. I thought that, yeah, she just didn't seem very like human or realistic. So that was, I don't know. I don't know if that's just how she was written. I think that's where it mainly comes from. I think Elizabeth Olsen is definitely a very good actress. She certainly showed that in WandaVision, but I think it didn't really come across in this movie. And I think that's because how the character was written. And the other, like, I don't know, some other nitpick things, like her accent, her Sokovian accent is a lot more thick in this film, and I'm not really sure why. Like, it's more thick than it was when we saw her in Endgame and Infinity War. Well, Infinity War mainly. Like, the beginning of that, she basically was back to, she had, like, more or less an American accent, so I'm not really sure what the reason is for her kind of going back to that. But, like, I'd say that's a minor nitpick. I mean, I think the main thing was just how mustache twirling of a villain she was. I think it would have been really powerful if they had actually visualized, her, like, Wanda inside kind of breaking free when she's in the end, seeing her kids and they're afraid of her. Like, I think that just could have been portrayed a lot better in the film, and it would have been a much stronger story for it. But the next up, we've got America Chavez. I thought she was pretty well done. Probably of the characters, I thought she had the most character development. But even that was just like her finding her powers. It wasn't too much like actual character development as far as having to overcome or like kind of change or like improve herself. Like in the first Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange has to kind of get over his ego, and it's when you have things like that that make the characters a lot more compelling. But I will give it that she did have the most character development in this, and that she's kind of discovering her powers and how to use them, and that becomes key by the end. So I thought she was well done. The rest of the characters, we'll just continue to go down the list. So Wong, I thought, was just underused. I don't understand why he's the Sorcerer Supreme. He's just kind of there because he's a character from the first one, but like he doesn't come across as necessarily the most powerful sorcerer. He just seems like another sorcerer. And I think that's, a weakness of this film. If you're going to set him up to be the Sorcerer Supreme, actually kind of demonstrate why that is. But he just seems like another sorcerer in all the scenes that he's in. I do think they did a really good job with Christine. I really liked how, like, for the most part, it seems with multiverse movies, then the other, like, then versions of the characters in other universes always seem to be like the off-brand version, or like kind of the B tier. They're never quite as good as the ones from our universe. So it was nice to see that Christine actually kind of took a step up, and she's got a lot more responsibility in the alternative, or in the alternate universe that they go to. So that was a nice addition. And kind of playing off that, the other cameos that we got from that universe, with the biggest one, and that was my favorite, was seeing John Krasinski in there as Reed Richards, and then getting Charles Xavier with Patrick Stewart back. That was really nice to see. And then some of the other ones, but all of them seemed kind of just like B tier versions of themselves from this universe, or at least B tier versions of those characters, since Wanda could just kind of go through them with with ease. But that was one thing I thought the movie did pretty well. They all had very brutal deaths, and I liked that they leaned into that. I think definitely kind of pushing the edge of that PG-13 rating with what you can do. But yeah, definitely some disturbing ways to go for them. But yeah, getting back to Christine, I thought she was, it was nice how they worked her into the story, and this was an alternate version of her, but we still got to see her original version, and that she's moving on in her life without Steven. But yeah, I mean, I guess on that note, I guess the one character development we get from Doctor Strange is kind of his acceptance. I don't know. He ponders the question throughout the film, like, should he be happy and can he be happy? But I feel like we never really get a clear answer to that. But yeah, other characters though, Mordo, I was assuming the version of Mordo we saw in the trailers was the version from this universe, but it wasn't. It was just the one from the other universe. So he had a surprisingly smaller role than I would have thought. And then also the cloak, Doctor Strange's cloak, I thought they played a little bit with it in the very beginning, I think. But the cloak didn't really feel like another character or a person in this film like it did in the first one. Like, the first one, it felt like Magic Carpet from Aladdin, who's like it's a character all on its own, and this one just seems like Doctor Strange's cloak. So I thought that was kind of a slip up, especially coming from the first one, that wasn't carried over into this one. And so the last thing we'll kind of end on were just some thoughts that I had about the multiverse. Like, does this film confirm that John Krasinski is now going to be playing Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four movie coming up? I was at first inclined to think, like, yeah, it does, because, all these other versions of the characters, like when we go to the other versions, like throughout the multiverse, these characters are always played by the same actors. So if we saw Reed Richards there and he's played by John Krasinski, he'll be played by John Krasinski in our world. But I think that was true, like those rules of the multiverse where characters look the same in different versions of the multiverse, I think that was in effect in this film, although we also had Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and I'll be surprised if they bring him into the X-Men in the MCU. But to that point, I was like, well, maybe they don't actually bring in Charles Xavier. Maybe, the X-Men that we get in the MCU doesn't include Charles Xavier. Maybe, it's past his time and that sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's the way they're going to go. But then I remembered, we're in the MCU, and the rules established in No Way Home is that you can have the same version of the character played by different actors. So we had, 3 Spider-Man, three Spider-Men played by three different actors. So that has me a little concerned that this didn't actually confirm that John Krasinski will be Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four film. I really hope he is. I love him as an actor, and I thought he, did a good job of the kind of the cameo in this film. But I'm definitely cautious moving forward. I'm not going to assume that it's confirmed until they actually confirm it. And yeah, so that kind of wraps up my thoughts on the film. Kind of what's standing out right now are the things that I didn't really like about it. It certainly was a very fun film, and I mean, I love pretty much anything that's Marvel. It's I think it's because I was so looking forward to this film that it didn't quite hit my expectations. So all that really comes out are what like why it didn't hit my expectations. But there's definitely a lot of fun stuff there. I really liked the kind of music battle, the music magic that Doctor Strange used in the battle against himself. So, but yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on the film. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who's your favorite character throughout the film? I mean, my favorite character is still Doctor Strange. He's still just a lot of fun to watch. But I do like the new addition of America Chavez. I think she will be interesting to see kind of in the MCU moving forward. And I'm curious to see how I'm curious to see kind of the repercussions of the events in this movie. Like, is Wanda really dead? I presume not, but maybe. And then kind of the price that Strange has to pay for having used the Darkhold and what toll that will take kind of moving forward. So, but yeah, share your thoughts down below. Feel free to get into spoilers. This was a spoiler review, so I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. What are the things you maybe didn't like about the film, or were there some things that you absolutely loved? I thought it maybe didn't feel quite as trippy as the first film, but it was still pretty trippy, and it was fun to see in IMAX 3D, which is the format that I saw it in. So I definitely recommend seeing it on as big of a screen as you can, and see it as soon as possible. I mean, if you're at this point in the review, I hope you've seen it. So, yeah, let's talk about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. And with that, we will catch you in the next review. Thanks for watching.